months since we went to Super Nintendo World in Osaka, Japan, where I got to experience what it would be like in the Mushroom Kingdom, punching question mark blocks and racking up the coins. By the way, who puts the coins in those blocks anyway, and why? Here at home, I kinda miss that satisfaction I got from hitting the blocks and getting rewarded for it. So I had this idea to make a life-size question mark block for the game room. However, the space in here is kind of limited, and a life-size question mark block would be pretty large, I'd say. So I thought about it for a while, and I ultimately decided to make a smaller block completely out of wood. Kinda like a old cuckoo clock, but instead of a bird coming out, it would be the Mario coin. Yes, I made it, and it's f***ing awesome. Here's how it went. For this build, I decided to use pine wood for its lightweight and beautiful wood grain. Since I don't own a table saw, or a garage for that matter, off camera I had the pine wood cut in 45-degree angles to make the wooden cube. There are tons of videos on YouTube on how to make a wooden cube, so just watch one of those if you want to try this build for yourself. Each side of the block is about 10.5 inches and all cut from the same board, so the wood grain matches up all the way through the block. I'll also be using a hole saw for the corners of the block, some Gorilla wood filler, 2 6-inch metal drawer rails that I got off of Amazon, and this is what we'll be using to get the block to move up and down for the mechanism. A couple of springs I got from the hardware store. Sorry, I don't know what these are called, I threw away the bag, but here's what they look like. A cheap xylophone, believe it or not, to make the coin chime, and we'll only be needing the B and E notes. With all of our supplies in order, there was one thing left to do. Get my wife's permission to use the dining table as a workspace. And let me tell you, boys, she said yes. Starting off, I printed out a Mario question mark block to use as a stencil. I used a digital caliper to center the mark before tracing it onto the wood. Then I cut those little bolt things on the corner of the block to trace those on as well. This is what we'll be using the hole saw for. Once we've got the other boards traced, we only need 3 by the way, I tape them together to check for errors. It's looking good, and I like how the grain continues on all sides, so it's time to move on. By the way, I am not a professional builder at all. This is just how I figured out how to make this block, so don't take this video as a tutorial per se. I'm very messy, as you'll see, so please be careful when using any of these tools. Wear eye protection, wear a mask, be safe. I want the question mark blocks to be raised off of the board, so I use the one clamp I have to help me mount the board to the kitchen countertop. I drilled holes in the corners of the mark so I could get my jigsaw in there to begin cutting. This made a ton of noise and it was a huge mess, so please wear eye protection and wear a mask so you don't breathe any of this in. Not a perfect job, but I'm happy. After we cut out the 2 marks, next I need to drill out the holes. Cutting and sanding wood makes a huge mess. Dust gets everywhere. So throughout this build, I'm constantly having to stop and clean up to reduce the dust buildup and also not get in trouble with my wife. Now I gotta use the wood filler on the gaps left by the drill. The filler is stainable and sandable. I just need to cover those areas and let it set so I can sand it to shape later. Okay, while that's drying, we're gonna work on the coin. This will also be made from the same pine wood I'm making the block out of. The coin is roughly gonna be about 6.5 inches. After tracing it onto the board, it's time to make yet another mess. And don't forget to wear goggles before using the jigsaw. Cutting the beveled edge out of the print so I can trace that onto the wood. And just for good measure, I measured. I'll be using a Dremel tool to carve out this section. This part was particularly frustrating because I wasn't getting the quick wood carving I was expecting from the Dremel tool. Each Dremel tool bit I used just didn't work fast enough, so this ended up taking a very, very long time. Once I got the general beveled edge set, I needed to trace out the center of the coin to mark the additional section to carve in deeper. Again, this was a very slow process. I used 100 grit sandpaper to carve out more wood while also leveling out the rest of the surface. Finally, you can see the coin start to take shape. This is where I started to sand for what seemed like days. Just sanding, 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 and sanding, sand, gotta sanding, and sanding all day. I sanded for hours, constantly. Keep going, gotta sand, and sanded. Just kept sanding, over and over, sanding all day, back and forth. Keep going, sand, keep sanding, sand, gotta keep sanding. I sanded for hours, constantly, over and over, back and forth, Keep going, just kept sanding, keep sanding all day, sand. Wow, would you look at that? That is a gorgeous wooden coin. Well, I guess the next step was just to sand everything else. I sanded for hours, constantly. Keep going. Gotta sand, and sand it. Just kept sanding, over and over, sanding all day, back and forth. Keep going. Sand, keep sanding, sand. Gotta keep sanding. I sanded for hours, constantly, over and over, back and forth, Sand, just kept sanding, keep sanding all day. Sand. You gotta keep sanding, sanding all day. Rub that sand. Well, it took a few years off my lifespan, but it was all worth it in the end. Next, I used AA batteries as spacers to keep the question mark up while the wood glue dries. I made sure to cover all edges with the glue. Exhausted, having sanded my fingers to the bone, I let the glue dry overnight. Off camera, I also covered the backs of the question mark blocks with wood filler for better security and to eliminate any gaps. I was very impressed with the results so far. I really liked how the grain followed over the raised question marks throughout the block. Before permanently attaching all the sides, I did a test fit. I noticed I had some blemishes left from the wood filler, so I had to sand those away before gluing the box together. I used masking tape to hold the wood together as the glue dries. I realized the bottom board was cut too small. Luckily, I had saved all the bits of wood from the cut before and had a sliver that perfectly fit the gap. I also went over the inside with more glue for better stability. I really don't want this to fall apart, so I used a lot. While all that was drying, it was time to finish the wooden coin. Now, I didn't want to stain it any color in particular. I actually really like the natural pine look, but I used pre-stain conditioner because it really brings out the natural look of the pine. I'm also using this citrus wood wax as a finisher. This stuff is like magic, and it smells amazing. The conditioner just gets brushed on and then wiped off after a few minutes. The citrus wax follows the same instruction. Put the wax on, wait, then wipe and buff it off. By the way, I chose not to carve out the other side of the coin because you'll only see the front anyway. Man, this coin looks sick. Now we're getting into the mechanism of the question mark block. I've got 2 panels of wood, 2 drawer rails, a smaller plank of wood, and I gotta put them all together. I've also got this short dowel I'm gonna be using to lift the coin up as the box rises. You'll see. I'm gluing the 2 planks of wood on the inside of the box so the rails will have something to mount on. I then took the rails apart to mark where the screws will go in. It's important I get this right because I don't want the rail to be off-center. The block needs to be able to raise and lower smoothly. It was a little snug the first time, so I made a small adjustment and fixed the issue. Next, I wanted to cut out the opening for the coin to pass through. This means it's time to make another mess. I needed the opening to be towards the front of the block instead of the dead center. The mechanics I have in mind are going to need all the space it can get for the coin, the entire coin, to raise above the block and also lower all the way down. Picture 1/2 of a seesaw, basically. I needed to use the jigsaw again to cut this out. Now don't worry, the glue holding the block together have pretty much dried at this point. I've been racking my brain with trying to figure out this mechanism that I'm going to use for the coin to come up as you push the box up off the wall. But now that I'm seeing it and seeing the limited space I have in this question mark block, my essential basic idea is to use some kind of leverage. The coin will be on one end of the stick, and then as the box moves up, the back of it, this part, the part that slides up and down, or rather the box slides on it, will have some kind of lever that pushes this stick up, pushes it down, lifting the coin up. This doesn't have to be pretty. It's gonna be ugly. As long as it works, that's what I care about. I can set up something like a stainless steel right here, that way, that makes sense. When the coin comes on two pillars, it's not gonna be bound in between these, like a metal pin, if that makes sense. Let's just try some stuff. And try some stuff I did. This ugly mechanism you're about to witness is what eventually turned out to work perfectly. As I said earlier, it doesn't need to look pretty as long as it works. I knew I needed a platform for the coin to mount onto and also be able to pivot forward and back. I realized the lever point for the dowel was way too high, so I drilled a hole much lower, and that seemed to do the trick. Finally, I was able to make something work. Okay, so it's been a few minutes, and what I've done is I've put a bunch of foam where the wood is knocking against each other because I don't want it to be clanging every time the coin mechanism. So this is basically what I've done. As you can see, it's taped right now because it's drying, the glue is drying, but I've just basically taken packaging foam that I had lying around and glued it to the sides. That way when the coin comes up, it doesn't knock and make a loud noise. I'm going to be using these on a spring. These are the instruments to hit the notes on the xylophone. And I just cut off the edge and put it to a spring. That way when the coin comes up, these are going to hit the notes, the individual notes, and not, I guess let me show you. Because if it hits and stops, as you see, it doesn't ring out. So that's why I put these on a spring, so I can somehow hit it and come back. It needs to be able to lift off when the mechanism goes. So basically, if it doesn't, it's just gonna sound like that. That's no good. You want it to go, which are the notes for the coin, which is B, E. So. First try. Hi, it's been a couple hours. I've been trying to figure out how to get the coin chime to work properly, and I think I finally got it. Check this out. You hear that? Almost there. Yeah, I think we're getting there. Let me show you what I've done. So with the mechanism, what I've done, for now I just taped it, these two arms on springs. When the coin comes up, we'll hit one note at a time. All right, so inside the box, this is where the magic happens. As the coin rises up, those arms that I showed you earlier, the spring arm is going to bend here, catch this little lip right here. It's going to flick that note, causing it to chime, and then as it raises up, hit this foam that I have, so it's not going to make a knocking sound. It's going to do the same thing, but obviously one is going to hit first, then the other, so it can do that kind of ba-ding sound. So I'm going to put foam on here too to muffle that sound as the coin lowers. That's the magic. So as the coin comes up, catches on the lips, goes ba-ding, and then the coin comes out. It feels so good to finally figure out what to do with this mechanism thing. I can't wait to get it done. Let's do it. We are so close to the finish line. Next, I needed to cut out a hole in the back panel for the dowel to poke through. This is what will cause the coin to rise as the back panel pulls down the lever as the block gets raised. And finally, it was time to finish the outside of the block and make this thing look pretty. Unfortunately, that means we have to do a lot more sanding. And after this project, I never want to sand ever again for the rest of my life. So I'm rounding out the corners and trying to make this look as smooth as possible. By the way, I started with 100 grit sandpaper, then 800 grit, and finished with 2000 grit because that's all I had. After thoroughly cleaning all the dust off, I covered the block with pre-stain conditioner. It looks so gorgeous at this point, I almost stopped there. But I really wanted to stain the block a different color than the question marks. So I went with cherry while keeping the question marks their natural pine color. This was definitely a stressful and slow process because I had to be very careful not to get any stain on the question marks. If you're wondering why I didn't use masking tape to cover up the marks before staining, it's because the tape wouldn't stick on after using the conditioner, so lesson learned. I needed to cover the ugly coin hole I made somehow, so I used some fake leather I had left from a previous cosplay. As it was black, it didn't match the cherry stain, but I liked it anyway. It kind of makes it look a little more antique. Now, for the holes I made in the corners of the block, I used these washers to fill those gaps, but I also covered them with this thick foil material. I really liked the way it looked after crimping it with the pair of pliers, so that's what I went with for the rest of them. The final step was to use the citrus wax. As I'm applying the wax, I can't help but be a little disappointed in how the stain turned out. I thought I did a good job sanding and conditioning the wood, but as you can see, there's a lot of scratches and marks. Oh well. Besides that, I am absolutely satisfied with the results. Thought we were done, huh? No way, we gotta mount this baby to the wall and see if it freaking works. I used masking tape to mark where the screw holes go. Basically, the idea was to use 2 blocks of wood to mount onto the wall using drywall screw mounts, obviously, and then attach the box to those wall-mounted blocks of wood. I'm using these metal brackets to attach the block. This took over 20 screws, and I ended up killing my arms. But it was definitely worth it to make sure the block had no chance of falling off. Honestly, I was very surprised this actually worked, everyone. This project was very much a figure it out as I go kind of thing. And to finally finish it was such a great feeling. So what do you guys think about this project? To be honest, I couldn't be happier with it. I think it's an amazing addition to the game room, and I'm just so happy that it all worked out in the end. Big thanks for watching this video all the way to the end, and an even bigger thank you to my wife for basically letting me destroy the kitchen and dining room area, at least for a couple days. Alright, I think this video is long enough. I need to go back to playing Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom. Later.